Hello, everyone. This is Super EV Master. Welcome to the 2015 FedEx 400 at Dover race review. The full name is the FedEx 400 Benefiting Autism Speaks at Dover. But anyway, I'm gonna get into this Dover race, what happened, and I feel like there are a couple things that I think have left a taste in my mouth from this Dover race. That is like, is there anyone who could get into the chase that's currently not on the chase grid if the chase were to start next week at Pocono? And also, what could we see from Pocono? And maybe I'll get into some of the other tracks because technically, starting at Pocono, I think the summer portion and like now it's time to get real serious about like this like chase. I think that all like starts like next week at Pocono. But anyway, I'm just gonna like first get out my thoughts of the race. I actually enjoy this race more than I expected to, and actually overall this weekend, like all three races in all three series, I enjoyed it more than I expected to. I'm not gonna get into the R2 series almost at all. But as far as this race, I think what maybe like this race more was not because of my favorite driver, Jimmie Johnson, winning the race for now like the 10th time, a record. He now joins a list of 5 drivers that have 10 wins. Richard Petty, David Pearson, Darrell Waltrip, and Dale Earnhardt, which all had 10 races at least one racetrack. But also, that wasn't really what made me enjoy this race. It was the fact of how there were some things that I was not expecting to. Because I think that in the past, in my personal opinion, what you expect to see at Dover will happen. It's not like the Coca-Cola 600 where it's like you can see comers and goers, or the race could come down to like a field mileage. It's not like that at all. I think Dover is kind of a track where you expect a lot, and generally, as a NASCAR fan, we don't really want to see that. We want to see, I think a lot of times we kind of want to be caught off guard because that is what makes it more memorable. Unless you're a fan of a driver that didn't want to see it happen to them, then you're obviously not going to like it. Because some of like if you caught me off guard moments were like the good finishes from like Eric Almirola and Paul Menard finishing 5th and 8th. This was Eric Almirola's first top 5 and top 10 of the year. So I was impressed to see that. Casey Kane and Kyle Larson also kind of also impressed me because when I think about like those two drivers, I don't like. I really don't know where Kyle Larson, how well Kyle Larson did in his past 2 Dover starts. But I know like Casey Kane, I know he had like the 2004 spring race. Like I think he would have like won that race. The thing is he got caught in like the oil and wrecked while he was like the leader. And so that was one race that slipped away from him at Dover. But I was impressed by his run and Kyle Larson's run and Palmer and Eric Almirola. What also caught me off guard was sort of like the string of like late race cautions. Like there were 3 of them, which did unfortunately catch some drivers that I did not want to see them finish or they did. But a string of late race cautions, I don't really think that's really ever happened at Dover. Maybe not since like the fall of 07. And that would be the last Dover race I would miss because I was not a NASCAR fan yet. I had just become a NASCAR fan a couple weeks after that race. But anyway, that's pretty much what I thought on the race. And wow, I actually came super unprepared. I forgot to get my notes. But anyway, now I have my notes. Now let's get into what happened before the race began. So the FedEx 400 Benefiting Autism Speaks. I think the biggest headline that I wrote down was the penalties. I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday where certain penalties were announced. There were 3 teams, and for 2 of these teams, they would get the same penalty. One team, a different penalty that was a little bit more harsher. Jimmie McMurray and the one team got the harshest penalty, a P2 penalty for adjusting a right rear quarter panel wheel opening that was modified apparently after qualifying inspection at Charlotte, before the Coca-Cola 600, or maybe it was before like previous inspection. I don't exactly remember. And the 2 other teams that got penalized were Jimmie Johnson and Justin Allgaier. They were given P1 penalties for now consecutive warnings, 2 of them. And apparently for both of these teams, it was not failing. It was failing, forget if it was pre-race or post-race qualifying, but and so like a P2 penalty for Jamie McMurray and his team, that was crew chief Matt McCall being placed on probation for the rest of the season. Jimmie Johnson just an outlier. It is. I think there are a couple of different like choices that NASCAR can do with like P1 penalties. I think maybe I'm not exactly quite sure, but I know. But the one that was assigned was they get to choose one of the last two pit stalls. But the thing is, Jimmie Johnson decided to appeal just because, and Johnson, I think, and I'm going to quote Johnson, we don't agree. That's what Johnson, I believe, said or thought when that penalty was announced. So because of that, they decided to appeal, and because they appealed, the penalty is not completely placed on them yet, and so because of that, they got to choose the pit stall they wanted, regardless of whether they got the pole or not. They didn't get the pole, so it kind of like didn't matter or not. And I know that there's probably like, especially people who don't like Jimmie Johnson, who are probably like NASCAR inconsistency and stuff like that. But to me, when Johnson appealed, like when Johnson appealed, it was pretty similar to what happened when Ryan Newman appealed. Before their final appeal didn't work, because the thing is, when it was first announced, it was Luke Lambert has to sit out for 6 races, and they have this 75 points penalty. But the thing is, when they appealed, Luke Lambert got to stay until the final appeal wasn't failed. And by the way, if you can hear noises in the background, I can't really do too much about that, I think. But anyway, now let's move on to other news. The fence this was news that I think wasn't really talked about on TV during the race, and that was the fence was raised from 21 feet to 15, which I honestly thought that was kind of an interesting change. I don't know like how necessary it was, because mainly Dover is not the type of track where cars get airborne. Like there have been like a couple of like flips, but as far as like airborne, I don't think you really see like too much of that at Dover. So, but I guess if it's to increase safety, then I'm all for it. And then so now let's get into like the practice sessions. Jimmie Johnson won the first practice. He came into this race as a 9-time winner. If he would have won this race, which he would become one of 5 drivers to win 10 races at least one racetrack. The other 4 drivers, as I mentioned, were Richard Petty, David Pearson, Darrell Walsh, and Dale Earnhardt. The last time it happened was Dale Earnhardt would have won 10 races at Talladega that fall 2010, that fall 2000 race. But anyway, on Saturday, it was all dominated by Denny Hamlin, who would also get the pole on Friday afternoon as well. And all 4 Gibbs drivers just seemed really strong. All 4 drivers qualified in the top 10. So, and I think a lot of that had to do with just simply they had a lot of momentum. They had a very good like all-star race in Coca-Cola 600 weekend for the most part. So I feel like it was that momentum that helped them get those great qualifying positions. And for the second week in a row, Hendrick Motorsports was pretty off mainly on qualifying, with all 4 drivers not making the final round for the second week in a row. And before the Coca-Cola 600, the last time I think all 4 drivers did not make the final round was I think sometime in the middle of like last season, like during the summer. It might have been Michigan, but anyway. Also, another topic that would have to be brought up later in the race was like the concrete sections. Like Dover, like this race actually marked the 20th anniversary of that concrete surface. Since then, that concrete surface has not been repaved. There have been certain sections that have been repaired, but the whole concrete surface has not been repaved. So, and in the last 2 races, one during the event, one between 2 events, pieces of the concrete broke off, causing like holes, and other parts got raised, which caused some repairs. And I think that like sometime within, I think at least like the next like 5 years, I think we could see the service get repaired, because the thing is, if this keeps on happening, it's going to like affect someone's day. And if it happens during the race, that's just gonna like kind of like waste like everyone's time, in my opinion. And also, the final previous note that I have here is a new. Last week at Charlotte, there was a new like rule where apparently if you change like a rear gear, you'll have to go to the rear of the field. And the first driver to get this kind of like violation was a Dale Earnhardt Jr., who apparently I think he had some kind of like oil problem in like the final practice, so maybe that was like what like influenced like the change. But he had to go to the rear of the field. But anyway, here is what happened on the race right here as I check something. Okay, so here's what went down during the race. Denny Hamlin picked the outside, and pretty much I don't think that there was like one restart, or start where the driver has chosen, where the lead driver chose the inside. The outside just seems to be the way to go because it seems like that there's more. I think maybe because like the track is like a bank track, like the front straightaways are not the front straightaways. I think the straightaways are banked at like 11 degrees. I'm not exactly sure. But I think because of like the banking and because of like the banking transition of from the straightaways to the corners, I think that's why like the outside like prevails a lot. But anyway, Hamlin took the outside and he got the lead early, and then but early on, Denny Hamlin he wasn't really able to like pull away from Martrix Jr. And then all of a sudden Martrix Jr. took the lead on lap 41, and then there were drivers like Kevin Harvick that moved inside the top three. And Dillon Jr. was definitely moving, but not moving as fast as I think some might have thought he would have. And then Denny Hamlin fell back to third by around lap 46, and not often, and talked about how he felt like his car would not turn as much as he would like it to. And Jimmie Johnson, who I think qualified in like the 14th position, was inside the top 5 by lap 66. Caution number 1 on the racetrack for debris in turn number 1. At the same time, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. came down the road with the hood up, and by this point, there were 20 cars on the lead lap. And I think that at Dover, I think it's kind of a little like normal to like have like several cars at lead lap, whether it's early in the race or late. And then we had a restart here on lap 80 with Hamlin clearing Truex, who by the way, Hamlin won the race on pit road. And then by lap 88, all 4 Joe Gibbs drivers would be inside the top 8. And I think this would be sort of like the peak of Joe Gibbs racing in general. From there on, things kind of went downhill, and things really went downhill late in the race. And by lap 100, it looked like Hamlin. It looked like he was finally starting to pull away. And then by lap 114, and this wasn't the first time a driver that we heard this. Jeff Gordon was reporting that he may have a tire going down. And apparently what the guys up in the booth were saying was how, like, Dover is definitely, races at Dover are, whether it's 500 laps or 400 laps, they're definitely endurance races, and it can really wear the car out. So it can like feel like that you have like a problem, but you didn't. Jeff Gordon never ever came down pit road. He didn't ever have to make an unscheduled pit stop, so I guess there wasn't a problem at all. And I think throughout the race, and I think a lot of this just has to do with like the track itself. You could say the rules package if you really like hate it that much, but it seemed like that it was just overall like super like hard to like sort of like catch like anyone. It seemed like. But anyway, Martrix Jr. got the lead back on lap 143, and I don't think Hamlin was ever able to get the lead back. Thus, that being Hamlin's high point, leading about 108 laps. I want to say maybe 103. Anyway, shortly after Truex took the lead, we had some green flag pit stops, and then we had a close moment with the eventual winner, Jimmie Johnson, where he and Mike Bliss made contact and both slid up the racetrack in turn 3, almost tamed the wall of both drivers. And then a close moment for our leader, Martrix Jr., where after the green flag pit stops, him and Eric Almirola made some contact coming out of turn number 2, which is kind of like a blind spot. Like I forget like exactly what they called it. They called it like, they said the name a couple times, but they called like something I forget. I wish I did. Anyway, caution number 2 on lap 163 when Ricky Stenhouse Jr. hits the wall in turns 1 and 2, and I just kind of feel like the overall like I'm not someone who's like, yep, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., classic Ricky Stenhouse Jr., he sucks. I'm not like that, because the thing is, I actually like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I remember like in 2008 was kind of like sort of like a very like looking back on it, like 2008 was very like nostalgic to me. That was my very first NASCAR season. Not only my first NASCAR season, but my first like IndyCar season and ARCA season. And I remember Ricky Stenhouse Jr. like being like one of those like championship contenders and being a Roush Fenway development driver. And so it feels like just like how I've grown up with the sport, it seems like I've sort of been like watching Ricky Stenhouse Jr. since the beginning. But I feel like the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I kind of feel like that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. might have benefited to stay in the Xfinity series, and I'm gonna and I would say the same thing to Trevor Bayne. But overall, it just seems like Roush is just not really making too much progress. Like they are kind of like they're kind of improving with Craig Biffle, but it just seems like Roush is really not getting to the level where I think they are capable of, and where I think they need to be. But anyway, we had a reach. Oh yeah, and also around the same time this happened, Carl Edwards, who stayed out to lead a couple, was when the jack left the car. Carl Edwards went. But the thing is, a wedge part of the wedge got stuck in the car, which then that was a penalty. But because of the caution, Edwards caught a lucky break. Lap 169, restart, and then we had new players. Matt Kenseth and Kevin Harvick were second and third, and then we had caution number 3 on lap 175 for a multi-car incident. And this would be the first. And this would be like the first of like a couple involving Trevor Bayne, Michael Annett, and Justin Allgaier. So one of the Roush Fenway drivers and 2 of the H. Scott Motorsports drivers. And what happened here was that I think Bayne thought that he was clear, and so he went up. But the thing is, he wasn't clear. Him and Michael Annett made contact. Bayne went into the inside wall, which I'll remind that at Dover, it doesn't really matter who you are. You could be like Jimmie Johnson, or you could be Trevor Bayne. The thing is, because the front straightaways are just so banked, it makes that part of the racetrack just a self-clean part of the racetrack, you know. And then Michael Annett, who hit the wall a couple times, then slid back on the racetrack, and that's where Justin Allgaier got collected. All 3 drivers, these would. I think Bayne would DNF, never come back on the racetrack, but for Michael Annett and Justin Allgaier, it really hurt their days. Anyway, we had pit stops on lap 182, and some drivers decided to stay out. One of those drivers being Martin Truex Jr., but like the top, I forget if it was the top 10 or top 11, they all stayed out. I don't know the drivers like first to 10th or 11th. But anyway, lap 189, this is where I felt like Dan Hamlin, I think that before his record, this would be like his like low point, is that he was just like stuck like midway through the pack. He was one of the drivers who came up the road, and really once he lost like second on lap 143, he kind of was almost never really much a factor and kept on losing before he came up the road. But apparently, kind of coming up the road made it even worse. But anyway, lap 278, Truex Jr. still had about a second lead over Matt Kenseth, and then Kyle Busch was able to take second away from Kenseth on lap 208. Harvick just a couple laps later. And then Harvick took second, and while Harvick was in second by around lap 273, and he was slowly catching Martin Truex Jr., the top 7, which were Truex, Harvick, Busch, Kenseth, Johnson, Larson, and Menard, who stayed out the last caution, we're all going to have to come to pit road. And the thing is, we did have a cycle of like pit stops. But the thing is, when some people might have thought that drivers like Clint Bowyer, Hamlin, and Gordon would all stay out, they actually all came down pit road, which I feel like really shows how. I wouldn't say it's very much like track position, but it's just simply like tires. You gotta get your fresh tires. But then right here during this cycle of green flag pit stops, a couple drivers got caught speeding. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was one of them. Carl Edwards another, and these were like mistakes that I think both of these drivers were not really ever to really be able to recover from, especially Carl Edwards. Anyway, and then Kevin Harvick became the leader once the cycle of pit stops finished. But then we had a caution here on number 4 for debris. And I think that there was like 2 debris on the racetrack. One of them was a spring, like some kind of like spring on the front stretch, like, and there was like a big spring too. And the other one was tire from I think Michael Annett that that roll down to the pit wall inside the pit road. And also at the same time, we also noticed of how concrete from Tony Stewart's pit stall all of a sudden came loose, and some parts actually broke off. And so now this marks the third Dover race in a row where there has been some kind of like concrete issue. But I kind of feel like that this one is a little bit more strange because the thing is, like, I believe like the Dover pit road, like the Dover pit road along with the pit stalls, I believe were paved heading into 2009. So to me, that was kind of very interesting. I don't know if they were like repaved or not, you know. So I might have to like go like research that exactly, but it was just interesting. And like I said, I think sometime within the next like 5 years, I think Dover will have a concrete repave. Like I don't think it'll go back to like an asphalt, like like it was before like 1995. But I think at sometime shortly in the next couple of years, we'll see that service gate repaved. Anyway, we had a restart here on lap 268. And then Kevin Harker here, he had a second lead over Martrix Jr. And then we had some good runs here from Brian Scott and Jacob Patrick, which were both inside the top of the team, and they both had fresher tires. And then by lap 281, Harvick had one of the largest leads we've seen all day, and that lead would continue to grow by over 2 seconds over Martrix Jr. And then we had a close moment right here from Dale Earnhardt Jr., who was a lap down, and Brian Scott on the lead lap in 19th position. They made contact in almost like the same way and in the same corner as Charbonnet and Michael Nett, but they were all able to save it. And the Matt Kenseth and the Matt Kenseth right here, who I believe was running inside the top 5, made an unscheduled pit stop because he thought that something was broken. This would result in him. He would come down pit road, I think, almost like 50 laps later. But then shortly after that second pit stop, he would be done for the day, thus resulting in what would have been a pretty good finish for that 20 team. But anyway, and then Kyle Busch was also reporting the same thing a couple laps later by lap 315, and then Jimmie Johnson was able to take second, and that would begin his hunt, and that would be where we would see him as like, okay, Johnson will be one of like the drivers that you'll have to reckon with by the time this race comes to an end. But anyway, the final set of green flag pit stops, or the final required set of green flag pit stops, began around lap 225. And then there were a couple drivers that were gambling, such as Keselowski, Gordon, Joe Logano, Greg Biffle, and I think maybe like another driver or two, but I can't like remember because I don't. They didn't really like talk about it. They were all trying to gamble in it. And the thing is, they knew that they were not going to win, but I think they were hoping for a caution to get good track position, because then they would have come up the road. They would have had fresh tires, and they would have had fresh tires, and they would have been able to restart in front of like Harvick, Truex, and Johnson, you know. But anyway, and the only speeding penalty under this situation, or the only one that was like talked about, was Danica Patrick, which kind of screwed her of a nice solid top 15 finish at one of her, I would say, at track that she has finished no better than 23rd. Man, I did not come prepared because I did not fill up my water bottle. But anyway, and by lap 340, there were a couple drivers that got their lap back, Harvick and Johnson, and then a couple laps after that, like everyone else would come down pit road, watches several laps later. But anyway, and then Martrix Jr. had his second run in by lap 368, this time with Jeb Burton, and it was a little bit more serious. Like I thought that that would have had like damage like the fender of Truex's car, but it didn't. And I felt like by this point, Truex's car was just simply not as fast, just because I felt like that. I don't think it was because they made the wrong adjustment. It was just simply because Harvick and Johnson finally got their cars tuned in to where they want them to be, and apparently in this race, a tuned in Harvick and Johnson is a lot more better than a tuned in Martrix Jr., whether you love that or don't. But anyway. Uh, and then, but then, unfortunately, like a heartbreaker struck her here on caution. When the fifth caution came out, when Kyle Busch, running in the third position, was trying to lap Brian Scott entering turn number 3. And I don't know if Kyle Busch had that problem that apparently was very similar to Matt Kenseth, or if Brian Scott turned into him, or whatever happened. But nevertheless, both drivers took a hard hit into turns 3 and 4. Both drivers will be okay, especially Kyle, who walked out of his car and didn't show any signs of like limping or anything else, and didn't say anything about his uh, about something being like really hurt when he was interviewed. Obviously, even though I'm not anywhere close to being a Kyle Busch fan, this was by far like something that I really did not want to see. Kyle Busch had a really good run at a track that is really either hit or miss with him. So to see that run was just simply, it was good for him. And whether it was something on the car breaking or Brian's got hit him, it was just kind of like aw. But anyway, here. So we had some pistons here, and the thing is, there were some interesting strategies. Jimmie Johnson and Cameron Hawk decided to stay out, and then Martin Jr. and Casey Kane decided to only take 2 tires. Everyone else on the lead lap took 4. And when this was happening right here, I was thought, this is interesting. I guess since Harvick and Johnson are in the chase, they can they can like take like chances, which is what I like about the chase, about how on the racetrack there was kind of like more experimenting going on. But I thought that like with Truex, Kane, Hamlin, or someone else having pressure tires, I thought that would actually I thought that would actually get by them, but that would never ever really be like the case, especially for Johnson right here, because on the restart, Jimmie Johnson, who restarted on the inside, and I think this was the only time someone on the inside was able to grab the lead after a restart. He got the lead off turn number 2, and to go by Harvick, and I think like Truex. I don't know if Truex got by Harvick, but it was either that restart or the next restart. Anyway, 2 laps later, caution number 6, when Clint Boyer and Denny Hamlin made contact off of turn number 2, and it looked like Denny Hamlin's car had it saved. But the thing is, his car he didn't hit the inside wall. But the thing is, his car was turned to the left and got pretty close to hitting the inside wall. And and obviously that part of the racetrack, there's just simply a lot of stuff you don't want to get on your tires because it can make your car very ill handling. And I think Hamilton also like overcorrected it a little bit, and then went back up across the racetrack into the outside wall. But just before he did that, Kurt Busch got collected and would hit, and he would hit the outside wall all the way towards turn number 4, and no one else hit the 2 drivers. I think there were some drivers like Austin Dillon who got some minor damage, but for the most part, that crash can had been like huge, and did it. And I felt like that, like more so for Denny Hamlin. That was also something I did not. That was also something I really did not want to see happen, just because I feel like the Hamlin, Dover is historically not one of his better tracks. In fact, sometimes it's actually a little bit of like a struggle for Denny Hamlin, and I felt like that something was finally going to go right. Like this was like the first time where I thought that like a driver that has FedEx as a sponsor could win a race that was sponsored by FedEx. Especially since FedEx and Austin Speaks do definitely have that relationship, both in the sponsor of the race and on Denny Hamlin's car. And so that was just simply like upsetting, and I felt like Denny Hamlin like deserved better than that with the car that he had today. But anyway, after this caution, we had a restart here on lap 391, and Casey Kane took second away from Kevin Harvick. There we go. And the Martin Jr. He tried to catch Kane, but he didn't. And he actually got loose, which would kind of ruin his momentum of 1 game by Kane and 2 catching Jimmie Johnson. And Johnson, it looked like Johnson was pulling away here, but then all of a sudden on lap 399, another caution. And this time, it was coming off turn number 3, entering turn number 4, and what happened here was that Casey Mears, who was just simply a slower car, was trying to get out of harm's way, and Biffle hit the back of him, and then Allmendinger got collected. Uh, there wasn't any like heavy damage on like any of these cars, but but it would take all 3 of those drivers out of the positioning that I think that they would have finished, and this set us up for a green white checkered. And I trying to remember if we really ever had like a green white checkered. I think we might have had like maybe at least like 1 or 2 green white checkered finishes at Dover in the Sprint Cup Series, but it generally I don't think has happened. Like it hasn't happened like very like much. And to me, with Casey Kane and Mark Truex Jr. second and third, this that was definitely what this is definitely not what Johnson wanted to have, because they look like Casey Kane and Mark Truex Jr. with like fresher tires, they might be able to pull it off. But on the restart of 444, Casey Kane didn't really get going, and plus Kevin Harvick, he was just pushing Jimmie Johnson because Harvick got one hell of a restart, and then so Harvick got second back, and actually Kyle Larson actually almost got by Harvick. It was like this. It was like Harvick almost got by Johnson and exiting turn number 2, and Larson almost got by Harvick exiting turn number 2. And for a second there, I thought that if Larson got by not Mark Jr. If Larson got by Kevin Harvick, then Larson could actually possibly like catch Johnson, but it just didn't happen. Coming off of turn number 4 on the final lap, Jimmie Johnson wins the FedEx 400, his 74th career win, his 10th at Dover, and like I said, becoming the 5th driver to win 10 races at least one racetrack. His 4th win of the season. And then also other highlights was that Truex came close once again. Casey Kane. Oh my God, not Casey Kane. Casey Kane also almost won a race, but I think out of the top 5, the highlight, in my opinion, was Aric Almirola. His first top 5 finish. It wasn't his first top 5, but it was also his first top 10 finish. And I think, like when I think about like Aric Almirola, I generally am very like neutral on him. Like I didn't really like appreciate like him winning at Daytona, mainly because I felt like he didn't really deserve it. He kind of got lucky with like every other good driver wrecking, in that race. But I feel like the Aric Almirola, he's making this number a bigger, like I think that to me, like this is like the biggest, like this is like I think the most like noticeable and most popular the 43 like car number has ever gotten since Richard Petty. Aric Almirola, they're now in the chase, and I think that and when I look at like the point standings, not the chase grid, but the point standings, they have a pretty comfortable margin over 17. So unless someone else wins, I think they will be in the chase. But anyway, that right there is pretty much the race. I'm not really. I don't think I'm really going to get into like too much about like reading through like some like the reactions of the race that I was reading on like forums or comment sections. I just don't really want to get into that. But I feel like I'm going to want to wrap this up quickly here. But anyway, I think like when I look at like the point standings overall, when you look at like the point standings, once again I'll say it's not the chase grid, it's the point standings. Ryan Newman would be the last driver to qualify his way on points, and Ryan Newman has, I think, more than a full race, just slightly more than a full race over Clint Bowyer, 17 points. So to me, I feel like that if that's how far Ryan Newman is ahead of like his closest competitor in the points, then I feel like that we could, I think realistically and legitimately, if I'm even using that word right, we could, our top 16 in the chase grid right now could be our top 16 by the time Richmond ends in the fall. But I feel like that if there's any driver that I think that's outside the top 7, not the top 17, the top 16 that could like win a race or maybe somehow like point the way in there, I think to me like number 1 on the list could be like someone like Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson seems to show speed at almost all types of racetracks. I feel like that if Larson can get a win, I think Larson could win one. So I think that could be a possibility. Never really, don't ever really count out AJ Allmendinger at road courses. And I feel like at some point, like I think I think at some point, you somehow gotta believe that Tony Stewart is going to get a good finish, or at least some kind of good momentum going for the team. 28th in points really has not really made gained almost at all. Really, almost really not ever since the season has started. So yeah, so I think Antonio Stewart. I think Antonio Stewart can still win a race. I just think that it just depends on what circumstances happen, if that's going to happen for him to get a win. So anyway, that's what I had to say about that. When I look at other drivers, you have drivers like Reagan, Austin Dillon, Sam Morris Jr., like Boyer. There just simply does not seem to be a whole lot of room, especially when you have someone like Johnson winning that is now his 4-career win, or when you have someone like Harvick also up front as well. And every and also you'll have Kurt Busch or Hamlin also up there as well. So there just doesn't currently seem when it comes to a track like Pocono, I don't really know if there's really that much of a window for to get a new winner. But speaking of Pocono, that's where we are going next. And I think that Pocono, I think it really could be either really good or really boring. I think it really just depends. But when I look at the average finishes, the top two drivers that have multiple starts, more than two, so Kyle Larson is out of this. Jeff Gordon and Jimmie Johnson. They are the top two drivers. Ryan Newman this is also historically one of his better tracks. He has the third best average finish. This could be a good trick for Tony Stewart if they can somehow get things going the right way. I think don't really ever count Hamlin out. Rakazowski, he's won here. Kevin Harvick, this is one of those tracks that he's actually never won at in this pickup series, but I think you gotta know with how good they've run the season that they'll be good there. Dillon Jr., he swept both races a season ago, so I think I would definitely put him as a driver to watch out for. But I think if I have to go for a driver, I'm going to go with. Oh my God, this is kind of a hard one. I think I'm once again. I don't know. Brad Keselowski, I think if Keselowski, he was trying to get he was trying to get trash off his grill and tried to use Dan Kirkpatrick as a driver to do that. But the thing is, that ended up being a mistake and got passed by Dillon Jr. So I think that this could be a race where we really could see what Brad Keselowski is made of. Because the thing is, Brad Keselowski so far this season, he's in the chase and he would be fifth. He would rank fifth on the chase grid. But to me, he's not really had sort of the breakout definitely championship contender type of season we saw a season ago. So I feel that this could be maybe where Keselowski can turn things around for even better. But anyway, I think that's pretty much all I really have to say. I think this race review has been going on for too long, even though I don't know how long these race reviews are when I'm doing them live. But anyway, I would like to thank everyone who is watching this, and be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, and bye.